Today we have our superintendent from Lakota School District in Cincinnati, Ohio, Mr. Matt Miller. Matt, we're so excited to have you. Welcome. So tell us a little bit about Lakota.
Dwayne, first, thanks to you and thanks to the league for giving me this opportunity just to talk about this really important topic today. Lakota Schools, we are a northern suburb of Cincinnati. We have almost 17,000 students, and this year, about 4,000 of those students are learning virtually, and then we have almost 13,000 that are actually in person. So we are on week 5 during COVID time, so to speak, and we're glad that our kids had an option to either do virtual or to be in person. And so it's kind of nice to have our kids back, or most of them back, and we're still trying to engage with our virtual kids as well. So a little bit about the district. Again, as I said, it's a northern suburb of Cincinnati. Our student population is about 70% Caucasian, probably 25% Black, 5% Hispanic and other. And that number is growing. And so that's a good situation for us to be in as we're during these times of growth and understanding and listening.
Awesome. So let's jump right in.
Yep.
So how has the experience of the past year shaped your understanding of the impact of race, culture, and ethnicity on teaching and learning?
You know, that's really been a challenge for Lakota, for my teachers, and quite honestly for the adults, just as much as it has been a challenge for the kids. It's a really difficult time for everybody with the pandemic. And then we have, the politics that are going on, not just locally, but across the nation. There are lines being drawn where I don't think lines should be drawn. There's a lack of what I'll say role models. Some people might say leadership in a lot of different areas. There's misunderstanding because we don't listen, we're not growing, and quite honestly, some don't care to. But some of the, probably Dwayne, the things that I would point out for the group that I'd like to share, some of the experiences that we're going through here at Lakota. And, I'm not going to tell you something that I would say, hey, we have it figured out and everybody should do it this way. I'm just going to share a little bit about how we're growing, what we're doing differently, how we're challenging ourselves, all of our communities, all of our cultures, and our population, if that's okay with you. Okay, so let me start with a little bit about 2 or 3 years ago. I started the Lakota Office of Diversity and Inclusion, so we call it LODI, and we have 2 people in that office, or we had 2 people in that office. One is Aisha Moore, who helps us with sort of the internal staffing and growth in terms of diversity and inclusion. And she also led what we call our Champions for Change. So there's a champion in each one of my 23 buildings that deals with diversity and inclusion for not just students, but for staff as well, and how those mesh together, should mesh, and what the growth and what the outreach for that is. And then I have Leah Aguiar, and she's more of the outward facing person to our community that sets up a lot of our events in the community, in the different populations, and also is really good at making sure that all populations are represented and served. Just about right towards the springtime at Lakota, we made the decision to bolster that group. And so I took one of my high school principals, Elgin Card, who is one of the best, I'll say he was one of the best high school principals, not just in Ohio, but across the country. And he's become our director of Lodi. And so he's been more of an outreach. He's one of those guys that everybody knows, and he's a people person. They're drawn to him. So we're trying to bolster that group, and because we know there's a lot of work to go on. And so that happened right before the tragic murder of George Floyd. And so we did some work after that. I put a letter out to my community, like I know a lot of my peers across the nation did, because even though it wasn't local, it impacted everybody, or should. And I'll be honest, and this is some of the things that I'm seeing from some of my colleagues across the nation and some of the superintendents in the league. I'm surprised about the backlash that we've received, quite honestly, from people who look like us. Mm-hmm. And that was not something I thought about ahead of time, and I guess maybe that was a misstep on my behalf. But most people got it, understood it, and support it. But I had some folks, some white people that look like me that said, you need to stay in your lane. And I'm like, look, my lane is going to be a mile wide. If you think that that's something that we don't need to address as a community, but also as a nation. So I think that's part of it too. That's part of the change to your original question, Dwayne. Another thing that I think as a superintendent, we need to be cognizant of is what I call checking a box. So the local or the statewide superintendent organization in Ohio is called BASA. It's a Buckeye Association of School Administrators, but really it's a superintendent organization. And every spring or early summer, we get a list of committees that we can serve on for BASA. And so I generally serve on the report card committee, legislative committee, technology committee. And so I'm looking at the list and I'm like, I want to be on the diversity committee, whatever we call it. So I'm looking at the 2-page document to select that one and probably take one of the other 3 off. We don't have one. And so shame on me for A, not knowing that, and B, for my state organization not having a diversity and or inclusion or something else committee. So called a few fellow superintendents and ran it up the flagpole at the organization and said, look, we need to have, especially now, we need to have our organization speak out and speak to what's going on to our kids and to our teachers and staff. So we just had our very first meeting this week. And so it was actually, it's actually going to be chaired by one of the League of Innovative School Superintendents, Melvin Brown, who's in Reynoldsburg in the Columbus area, about 2 hours north of me. So he led that, did a great job. We had probably almost 50 superintendents that are going to serve in part of that. And we have 612 in the state of Ohio, so 50 serving on that committee is pretty good. Melvin did a great job. And what I mean, let me go back a few minutes ago. What I mean by checking a box is there were a few people, quite honestly, that were on the Zoom that I felt like they just felt like they wanted to be there, so their name was attached to it. And again, they can check the box. We're in a diversity and inclusion group. And you know what? We need to quit that BS line of thinking that that's all it takes is just to say you're doing it, and it's not very actionable. And so we challenged a little bit of the group that was in the room about that. And I think we need to start having conversations not only about diversity and inclusion, but anti-racism, diversity and inclusion. So let's call it what it is and throw that out there and no longer check boxes. And I'm not saying that I have it figured out. I have a lot of growth I need to do and a lot of things that I need to learn more about. And so I own that too. But I'm just tired of being complacent and not speaking out when we see things. And I've seen, other superintendents too that quite frankly look like me that are getting hit by their own communities about, why are you speaking out? Why are you doing it now? And so the answer to why now is I don't have a good answer why now. It feels different now this time. And it's something that I don't think we should let go and think that it's going to get better by checking the box and not doing anything anymore. So that's the second thing I would say to your question, Dwayne. And then the third thing, what the school board here at Lakota just did this week, Monday night. So just a couple of days ago, we had an open board position. So in Ohio, there's a 5-member board in my district. We had a open seat. So the 4 remaining Board of Education people had to pick a replacement since we're not in an election time. So we were looking for somebody to serve for the next year and 3 months, so to speak, because that's when the term runs out. And we talked collectively as a board and an administrative group that we don't have representation of people of color on our board. And so now we do. They selected somebody. It wasn't the main reason, but he's a fantastic individual. And now we have a person of color on our school board that if you look at the percentage of our population, it's now almost in sync. And so I feel good about our kids can see, our kids of color can see somebody like them that's serving on our school board. And so I think that is really, really important for us and for my community right now.
Great. Thank you, Matt, for your transparency and your commitment. that, the old adage says when you talk about checking the box and
Yeah.
about your colleagues, trying to be on a committee, actions speak louder than words. So it's the actions that really count right now.
Yeah, it is an action piece. And when I talked about Elgin Card a little while ago, um, he, really good guy, really well known in the community. It wasn't that I had to talk him into it. He knew that he needed to do something else, not because he wasn't doing a good job as a high school principal, but because of the times that we're in right now. And
Uh-huh.
so when we talked about his role and the direction that the district needs to go in, and quite frankly, the professional direction I have to go in, he just said yesterday to me, remember when we first talked, you said you wanted me to be on you about X, Y, and Z. And so yesterday he gave me the X, Y, and Z conversation that, remember, you got to follow through with some of the things that you said you were going to do, and we're going to. And so I need him to stay on me, and he is. And so again, as leaders, I think we all know that there are people in our organizations that hold us accountable, or can hold us accountable in a way that maybe some others can't, or we don't listen sometimes. And so Elgin is one of those, to me, that can come in and shut the door and not worry about me exploding or something else. But he's good for me, good for my leadership style. And I think, again, as superintendents, we need people around us that hold us accountable, that are sort of our truth tellers.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked about your commitment. You talked about the things that you were changing. How has this reinforced your district's commitment to equity?
It's been hard, and it's hard because and when we're talking about equity and making that commitment, there's a lot of just swirling politics that we know is out there, and probably don't have to call it out right now, but we're dealing with some of that for our kids and for our staff. When we had a professional development day just last week, when we're talking about equity, Elgin and his team were talking about white privilege and what does that look like as educators, and how do we move past that, or not really move past it, but how do we address it, acknowledge it, and grow from it. And so that made some of the staff members very uncomfortable, and I'm okay with that, with them being uncomfortable. I'm okay with myself being uncomfortable because I have a lot to learn. So I think it's, to your question, I think it's a little bit of self-awareness under the issues of what we're going through right now, and that commitment of being actionable and growing and changing. And not everybody's going to be able to do that overnight or in a week or in a month, but I think it's an evolution, it's a growth process. I don't think it's a set timeline per se. As long as people are getting better and acknowledging and listening and learning, I think that would go a long way if we could all do that.
Yes, 100%. So my last question to you, how will you sustain these practices and commitment to equity and anti-racism culture in your school systems?
That is a great question. Well, I think you have to do part 2 in a couple months and see where I'm at and hold me accountable. But I think it goes back to listening, growing, and learning, and having those voices on your shoulder that are guiding you and saying, are you making the right decisions? Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? I have Elgin, or I will be having Elgin, who's my director of anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion, as part of the executive team coming up, because sometimes I think some of these diversity and inclusion movements are more of one-offs, or when things settle down, whatever that means, it goes away. So we want to make sure that the equity piece is embedded in our curriculum department, in our technology department, in HR. So it's a constant thing and not just a one-off temporary slot.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's Matt Miller from Lakota School District. Thank you so much, sir. And we wish you the best of luck the remainder of the school year.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.